Morning, sir.
Good morning. Good morning.
Subhai, please start.
Education is not the learning of facts, but the training of the mind to think. I, Subhash Srinidhi from Chennai Institute of Technology, pursuing my third year civil engineering. It's a great pleasure and honor to welcome you all for this faculty development program on sustainable smart cities. We successfully completed 2 days of this program, where on first day we had Professor Gar from IIT Roorkee, who delivered the lecture on applications of GIS for smart city. And the afternoon session was held by Mr. Sampath Kumar, who had an interactive session on Introduction to Smart Cities concept. On second day, the forenoon session was held by Dr. Natarajan, Dean at College of Engineering, who gave a brief explanation on green energy management. And the afternoon session was taken by Dr. Whelan on the topic Technologies Involved in Developing Smart Cities. And now we are entering into the third day of the program with our honorable speaker, Dr. Pavendan, who is the Director R&D with ERNet India, which is an autonomous society under the Ministry of Electronics and IT, Government of India, which is located at the IIT Madras Research Park campus. He is with ERNet since 2009, carrying out R&D projects in the domains of Internet of Things, cloud computing, software-defined networking, and visible light communication. Pre-ERNet, he held scientific and research positions in the National Informatics Center, New Delhi, CTAC, Bangalore, and Rutherford Appleton Laboratory, Oxfordshire, UK. He received his MTech Computer Applications from IIT Delhi and PhD in Computational Engineering from University of Southampton, UK. He is a senior member of IEEE, also senior member of ACM and a member of Internet Society too. Now, I cordially welcome Dr. A. Pavendan to deliver his lecture on wire sensor networks, technology, and applications for smart cities. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your introduction. And also, I would like to thank Dr. Parthiban and Chennai Institute of Technology Management for giving me the opportunity to speak to this gathering. So it's really a good initiative in this kind of scenario where we reach out to the community. So I'll just share my presentation. So in today's talk, I'll try to, since there is a background set already in terms of introducing smart city concepts and what are the various applications, and also it's the right time probably we venture into wireless sensor networks. That is my topic. So I'll try to bring up my screen. So just give me a minute. So you're able to see my screen now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Again, thanks everyone and good morning everyone. I'll be presenting today on the topic of wireless sensor network technology and applications for smart cities. So I head the regional center of ERNet India at IIT Madras Research Park in Chennai. So we carry out R&D collaboratively with academic institution. So that is our mandate. ERNet India is education research network, which has been there for about 3 decades. So since 1986, when it was started as academic project among IITs to bring internet to India. So it is credited to bringing internet to India way back in 1986 as an academic initiative connecting ERNet POP at IIT Bombay to EUNet in USA. So that is how we got internet, and we progressed from there from then to now, there is a lot of progress that has happened, and smart cities is one of the major initiative by government. And also wireless sensor network and Internet of Things is a major technology development which can contribute to smart city deployment. So with this brief, I'll just give you the outline in terms of what is the coverage of my presentation. So I'll try to give a overview of WSN in terms of many of you I understand are coming from the electronics and communications background or civil. I think the smart city is a kind of interdisciplinary technology. So I expect that there are many engineering faculty who are attending. So to make it a little more generic, so I made it not too focused on only on electronic side of things. So this will give a brief in terms of what is wireless sensor networks and also how the technology standards are moving from a conventional approach to a standards compliant approach, and what are the challenges in the application deployments. So that I'll try to highlight with a few initiatives. And also I'll go into details in terms of what are specific enabling technologies for smart cities, especially on the short range and long range technologies, including Internet of Things and the protocols. And some of the activities that are happening in ERNET, I'll try to highlight towards the end of my talk. So you can stop me in between if there are questions. Otherwise, we will take it at the end of the presentation. I think I have about an hour to cover my presentation. So I'll just go as per this. Yeah, thank you. So in terms of the overview, just to give a brief in terms of what constitutes wireless sensor network, they are essentially a low-cost, low-power platforms, and they are expected. Wireless sensor nodes are expected to be deployed in a large area where the local sensing happens, and then the data gets communicated to the internet through a sync node. So that is the kind of model it follows. And the individual nodes will have processing unit and also a memory, and it will have a sensing unit. It can have an onboard sensor or external sensors that are connected to the standard interfaces. And it will have a radio modules to communicate amongst them, or it can communicate to the sync node. So that is the kind of, it will have a communication, processing and sensing, and also it will have a battery to operate. So generally the energy is a major issue in the wireless sensor node. So the optimal utilization of energy is also a major research study. So as you all know that it operates on a battery. So obviously the transmit and sleep power requirement are in terms of microwatts. So whenever it is transmitting, then it goes into sleep mode after that, and then when there is something to receive, it comes up. So the sleep cycle and transmit receive cycle are an important scheduling that is managed within the WSN node. In terms of the typical network architecture, you could have star topology where the sensor nodes connect to a gateway node, or that is also known as a sink. So in a star topology, they can all in one hop they connect directly to the sync node, or as shown in the left hand side bottom, they can form a mesh amongst the nodes, and they all communicate amongst themselves and also and connect to the sync node towards the internet. So essentially the sync node is a gateway that connects to the internet, and the user can communicate to the wireless sensor node through internet, through the gateway all the way up to the sensor node in the field. And the other topology that is possible is also a cluster tree kind of a forming. So where a root node connects to the different clusters, and then these root nodes in turn connect to the sync node, and then the sync node connects to the internet. So these are kind of hierarchical cluster topology is also possible. So the combination of star mesh can provide different ways of deployment options for a wireless sensor network architecture. So in terms of classification of wireless sensor network, typically the sensors are deployed in a single location and they don't move from one location to the other. So they are known as a static network. Whereas in case of a mobile network, in a typical, for example, wearables or animal fitted with a collar having a sensor. So these are scenarios where the network or the mobile scenario is possible. So the wireless sensor node is moving. So then the network has to accommodate such scenarios. So these are one option, and the other option is some the deterministic and non-deterministic in terms of their location of deployment. For example, in the deterministic deployment, sensor locations are all planned in advance. For example, if we are monitoring a flyover for its stability or structural health monitoring, so probably their locations are all fixed and the data is collected periodically from that location. In case of non-deterministic, if you are monitoring, for example, something like air quality or something that's where in a forest you want to deploy sensors, random locations. So these are scenarios where the deployment is not fixed at one particular location. They are deployed in random and the data is collected. Similarly, we can have redundancy in the form of the gateways, where you can have more than one gateway connecting to the internet. So these wireless sensor nodes can connect to more than one sink, so or single sink. So that is the kind of options one can do, and also whether the nodes are self-configurable or not. So if they can, for example, if there is one node that is going faulty, and in a mesh topology, then you cannot reach the sink, then you need to find an alternate route to connect to the sink. So then the nodes identify the next parent available in the mesh topology so that they remain connected to the internet. So these are a kind of scenarios where the nodes have the capability to configure themselves in terms of connectivity. So they remain connected to the network by means of self-configuration. If that is possible, then they are self-configurable network, whereas in the non-self-configurable situation, the configurations are all statically maintained and there is no possibility for nodes to dynamically configure themselves. And other classification is homogeneous and heterogeneous, where the nodes, node types are all similar in terms of their capabilities, whereas in heterogeneous, we can have specialized nodes where they might do, let's say, additional processing of, for example, as a wireless sensor node connected to a video camera, might have to do more processing locally so that it doesn't have to send every video feed to the internet for processing. Rather, it can do a local processing for some local alerts or even for better data handling at the server side. Probably it has to prune out some unwanted videos and then it only sends relevant ones. So there could be some additional functions. In a heterogeneous wireless sensor node deployment, you will have multiple nodes having different capabilities depending on the application use case. So this is the in terms of the classification. So just let me go through in terms of the history of the wireless sensor network, how it has evolved, let's say from early 1980s when the United States Defense Agency has initiated the lot of wireless sensor networking program. That is when, as a concept, this was initiated. And also post which we had the University of California at Los Angeles. They had a project where an integrated wireless sensor node was developed, which can run on low power. That is in 1993 this was developed. And in 1999 there is a very popular initiative called Smart Dust at the University of California, Berkeley. That has resulted in what is known as MICA modes. And also they have that operating system known as TinyOS and programming language Nessie. Many of you might have been or already had experience in using the Telosby Sky mode. So these are all some of the development platform which has resulted from the Smart Dust project development. So Telosby Sky is one of the platform many academic institutions had exposure to. And the initial operating system that was made available through this project was TinyOS, and this is still even being used, and the people have migrated to Contiki and many other operating systems after that. And there is also another project from MIT in 2002 on micro-adaptive multi-domain power-aware sensors. So there also it's similar mandate where low-power hardware with a lot of software components developed. So the subsequent to that, in 2003, there was a major effort towards standardizing the MAC and physical and MAC layer of the WPAN network, wireless personal area network. So this has resulted in 802.15.4 standard, which got released in 2003. And also in similar time frame, there was also another alliance called Zigbee Alliance, which is essentially an industry alliance, which also had similar mandate. They can operate between each other because LoWPAN and Zigbee are physical and MAC layers are compatible. So in 2003 time frame that got developed, and subsequently in 2007 there was an effort to port internet protocol, IP protocol on top of this LoWPAN standard. This has happened in 2007. The RFC was released in 2007, first standard. So this has essentially created or enabled this WSN nodes to connect seamlessly to internet. So this is a major step forward in terms of seamless connectivity to internet. So this is around 2007-8. People have started deploying 6LoWPAN on wireless sensor nodes. So then you can run on many IP-based applications on top of these 6LoWPAN networks. So that was a major timeline in the history of WSN. And recently there are efforts on LPWAN related standards like WISN, LoRaWAN, NB-IoT, Sigfox. These are some of the standards that are being emerging as an alternate for the short range technology, whereas this low power wide range technology can give distance of about up to kilometer and more for connectivity from WSN node to the gateway node. So these are the kind of technologies that are emerging as a complementary technology to LoWPAN. And as you all know, 5G standards are getting finalized, and many of these implementations or trials are being done in Korea and other locations across the world. Even in India, there is a 5G testbed funded by Department of Telecom. So one of the major requirement of 5G is on the massive machine type communication. Apart from the ultra reliable low latency and the enhanced mobile broadband, massive machine type communications, MMTC, has become part of the 5G standard. That is expected to support about 1 million devices in a square kilometer area. So that is a kind of requirement that it will meet. So it's really, once it is done, probably we will have a lot of cellular based WSN nodes being connecting to internet. So whereas the LoWPAN and LPWAN are all operating on the unlicensed scenarios, whereas the cellular will connect devices in a licensed spectrum. Probably the end user will have to pay the subscription charges just like we pay for the mobile phone, but they will have a better coverage in terms of the outreach, because there are already base stations available, and the connectivity to the device to the gateway will be much easier in the 5G scenario. So just to differentiate between what has changed from a conventional wireless sensor network approach to a standards compliant approach, I just want to highlight what was the initial WSN systems look like. So during the conventional or the traditional WSN network, during the initial days of WSN ideas, people had developed their own protocol stack and their own operating systems, And then if they want to connect to the internet, they probably need to put up a protocol gateway or a translator sitting in the middle that will translate the WSN traffic to internet and the internet traffic back to WSN. So we need to have a protocol translator kind of scenario. And also these networks tend to operate in silos, and they are also application specific. Some may be just developed for structural health monitoring, some may be for health, some may be for, let's say, air quality monitoring and so forth. So, and they don't have standards compliant protocol stacks enabled. So these networks operate in silos, and between WSN networks, they can't talk to each other directly. So they need some kind of a gateway node to connect to each other. So essentially, they don't have internet protocol enabled in individual nodes. So if it is enabled, then they can seamlessly connect to internet. So that is what was missing in the conventional WSN approach. So in case as we move forward to the present situation, we have many IoT standards or WSN standards available at different layers of the protocol stack. If we think of three major areas, one is on the device interface standards, where you will have at the physical layer, you will have many standards supporting for the sensor or devices to connect to like USB, SPI, or I2C, and the power line communication. There will be many standards at the physical connectivity layer. And at the protocol layer and the physical and MAC layer, you have Bluetooth, IEEE 802.15.4, ZigBee, and many of these publicly available open standards are available for one to adapt, depending on the application requirements. Similarly, at the application layer level and the data aggregation level, you have IETF protocols like CoAP, Constrained Application Protocol, or MQTT. So these are some of the protocols that will enable interoperation between different WSN nodes to each other, and also between networks to each other. So this is a major requirement if we want to do large scale data aggregation and analytics, which is the essential requirement for a smart city kind of large scale application. So this is where the standards are useful, because once you have the standards based deployment, the data collection using existing applications, and also interoperation amongst the different services can be enabled easily. So with this backdrop, I'll try to move to the specific smart city data management challenges to highlight specific issues. So as we can see that smart city, I think we probably other speakers earlier would have given a lot of brief in terms of applications. Just to give one slide brief in terms of what sort of applications smart cities will have. They'll have energy, where you could have renewable solar or wind or rooftop solar, and you can also have smart metering or water metering or gas distribution. So many things can be monitored. And also in case of transport, we can have traffic monitoring, or EV charging stations can be connected to the smart city infrastructure to know where I can go to the next charging station, whether that charging station has enough battery in their stock, so that I can go there confidently and then offload my battery and then take the new battery on. So these are the kind of applications in the transport side. And in public services, we can have health, education, a lot of street lighting. So many of them can be enabled with smart city infrastructure network. And water is one of the major use case in the smart city. And in case of energy management, better energy management, we can have a smart building and smart home applications. So these are the gamut of applications one can enable. So if we think smart city as more like a hardware platform, then these applications can be thought more like an operating systems, which runs on top of it to enable better citizenship-centric services for better governance. So it is more like enabling smart services on top of the standards compliant device layer. So when I said the device layer, so at the device layer you could have many domains which feed to the data or the integration layer, where the data gets integrated to provide a better dashboard for governance or citizen for to the citizens of the a particular smart city. So they can consume the data. So for effective services to the end user, one has to collate this data from different sources and make a meaningful analysis out of this, and then the city administration or the normal user can also be benefited out of this. So the integrated platform is required, and they'll get enabled by standards. So data is the major important factor in the smart city deployment. So, for example, the data sources can come in multiple formats, and also they can be coming from sensors, or they can come from, let's say, social media data. It can be a Twitter feed also. For example, somebody tweeting that there is a heavy traffic in a particular location, that can itself can become a data to the that can useful for the smart city management. So similarly, they can be from services can also feed to the data. So the data sources doesn't have to be only sensors. They can be applications by themselves, and also they can be social media, and also different services. And in terms of acquisition, so you will have an acquisition layer where they get consumed by different APIs and translation or some kind of extraction mechanism where they get sanitized for integration and storage. And once it is stored, people can analyze and make a lot of intelligent decisions based on this data. So once it is effectively managed in the repository. And finally, the delivery of services will be in terms of reports, alerts, and also people can consume these data through their mobile phones and so forth. So the entire data pipeline, if you see, from devices to data acquisitions to storage to analysis to the actual delivery in terms of information or intelligent information to the public and the government. So the data is the major byproduct or the ingredient for the smart city applications. So effective management is a major important aspect of smart city. So the data sharing will have to be enabled through some kind of models. So what are the typical models one can plan? It could be a completely open platform where, for example, it's freely available, and government can enable consumption of this smart city data to, for example, other government agencies, or it could be for the business or even for academic research. So it's a kind of a one-way communication. They provide the API, and the consumer can access through these APIs. It's a kind of a one-way data exchange platform from government to different entities. Or it can be a many-to-many kind of a consumption model where a data exchange platform acts more like a broker, where anybody can consume and then make some quality kind of analysis and make some kind of a inferred data out of that, or we can say more of useful information from the analyzed data. Somebody else can again reuse it for making another services. So it's a kind of a many-to-many scenario where people can exchange these data using this broker platform freely. So it's a kind of a publish subscribe model, so people can exchange this. So it's a kind of instead of one way, it is a many-to-many scenario. Other approach to data sharing is a marketplace where people can come and buy the data by paying some money, or they can pay premium cost to some kind of highly valuable data. So it is again a one-to-one relationship, but it's traded. Data is traded just like Amazon or OLX or any marketing platform. People come and buy that data to provide meaningful services in a smart city place. So these are different models one can adapt in a smart city context. So just to give an example in terms of what are typically used worldwide. So in Denmark, Copenhagen, so they use what is known as a city data exchange, where it is a collaborative effort among industry. So it is more like the data broker model, which I was referring to earlier. And in the UK, 4 of the counties are using what is known as One Transport data marketplace. Again, this is more like a buyer coming and then the seller provides data as a service. So this is being adopted in UK. So it uses what is known as a one M2M standard. So it is again a European standard promoted by European standards agency called ETSI. So one M2M standard is being used in this case. And in US, Columbus, this is again a data broker model where integrated data exchange allows many-to-many data exchange where the consumer and publisher can subscribe through a broker model. So a broker enables this publish subscribe of the smart city data. So the other initiative in India I want to highlight is on the India Urban Data Exchange, which is a project funded by Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs to Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. It is a ministry funded initiative, and there is a reference architecture which was published by IISc on the IUDX platform, which is again the data broker model where it enables data sets, smart city data sets, to be consumed by various smart city applications through a publish subscribe model, where the IUDX acts more like a broker, publishing data through various catalogs, for example, air quality or traffic or let's say surveillance data. So many of this stakeholder can publish to this, or they can also subscribe to this data set depending on what is that entity. If it is a government agency which is responsible for it, probably they are the publisher. And if it is some consumer, probably they'll subscribe to it and they'll consume it. So depending on the role and this one, so this platform enables such a publish subscribe model through a IUDX exchange platform. So it is already being trialed, getting trialed at Pune Smart City project, where around 850 data sets are being exposed via IUDX APIs. So this is one of the initiative which is already using this data model. So now I'll specifically with this in context, if you want to enable such consumption of data seamlessly from the user all the way up to the smart city infrastructure devices, wireless sensor nodes, we need to have standard compliance all across the protocol stack. It cannot be only at the device level, or it cannot be only at the protocol level. So we need to have enabling standards at different levels. So I'll try to cover different technologies in this further presentations. So in terms of enabling wireless technologies, you can see from this slide that There are short-range technologies like NFC and Bluetooth, which enables proximity sensing, what is known as proximity sensing, and wireless personal area network like Zigbee and IEEE 802.15.4 standard will allow communication from 30 meters to 100 meters range, so that they can form a short-range mesh network, and then amongst them they can communicate. For example, street lighting or a smart metering kind of project, they can use this kind of technology to connect to the gateway node. And in case of a long-range technology options, we have low power wide area network technologies like Wi-SUN, which is wireless for smart utility network, which is again 802.15.4 customized for smart grid scenario. So they are essentially 802.15.4, but it operates on 867 megahertz spectrum in India. So whereas the 802.15.4 default MAC layer and physical layer, they operate in 2.4 gigahertz, that is Wi-Fi frequency. So whereas the Wi-SUN operates in the sub-gigahertz frequency, so that it can support long-range communication. So similarly, the LoRaWAN standard also can operate in 867 megahertz frequency, so that it can operate 1 kilometer up to 10 kilometer range for communication. So in the licensed scenario, we have narrowband IoT in cellular 3GPP standard. So that can also support long-range communication, but that is a licensed frequency. Obviously, one has to pay the pay to the subscription model. So where Airtel or Vodafone will be charging the consumer on the last mile connectivity. So an unlicensed and licensed options are available for long-range communication also. So if we see the standards landscape, it is not easy now because there are many technology options at the device level and the network transport level and at the framework and development level. So definitely there are plethora of technology options, but these can be selected based on the application requirements. And also depending on whether this is being deployed large scale or in a small scale or in a private scenario or in a public scenario. So there are many aspects one has to look at before choosing the technology. And also what is the data bandwidth that is required for this particular application. So and also how much time or what is the frequency of data collection. So and whether it is connected to the power or whether it is battery operated. So all those will determine what options one has to go for. And also in terms of network layer, you have IETF and the W3 standards at the web protocols. And then we also have IEC and ISO standards available at the network and transport level. And in the framework, we have 1M2M standard supported by the ETSI community or European Standards Development Agency. And also Google Thread and so many other frameworks are also available for standards compliant developments. And we have a vertical specific recommendations also, like for example, Industrial Internet Consortium looks at Industry 4.0 deployment and they provide recommendations for that. Or smart building automation, there is alliance, separate alliance. There are various technology alliance for different application domains, from health to smart home to connected building to transport to industrial IoT. So there are many vertical focused alliance which provide recommendations in terms of how to realize specific use cases. So here I would like to present the comparison in terms of different short range and long range technology versus the bandwidth and also the device cost. For example, the 3GPP cellular is costlier. However, the bandwidth that it can provide is on the higher side, and also the coverage range is also more than 10 kilometers and higher. Whereas in the WPAN IEEE 802.15.4 or NFC Bluetooth, their coverage range is low. Also, the device cost is very low. Like for example, for 400, 500 rupees, one can have a WSN node completely connecting to the internet seamlessly, but their coverage range would be limited. Similarly, there is this LPWAN technology which provides a relatively higher coverage and also lower cost. However, their bit rate is limited. For example, LoRa can only provide few kilobits per second, whereas the cellular can go up to megabits per second. So these are some trade-offs one has to make while choosing a particular technology in a particular scenario. For example, LoRa can be used for smart street lighting and so forth. Probably the cellular communication can be used for high bandwidth use cases. So one has to decide based on the application requirements. So what are the different WPAN standards and technologies? So as I'll try to give a brief in terms of specific application technologies at the physical layer in this. So for example, the near field communication supports proximity sensing, where for example, a mobile phone can be used for seamless entry into a metro station or for withdrawing cash from an ATM machine. So, so many applications are possible with NFC using it is more like a smart card, but it is integrated in a smartphone. So it can also support prepayment energy meters, for example. If you want to have prepayment meters, then the payment can be done through NFC enabled meters through our mobile phone. For example, a Google Pay or something can be used for payment through the prepayment meters. So when it comes to Bluetooth Low Energy, it's mostly used in healthcare applications, wearables, and those scenarios where short range to the gateway. For example, wearable communicating to the gateway using Bluetooth, and then from the gateway it goes to the internet through wired or wireless connection. So in those scenarios, in an unlicensed band, it operates at 2.4 gigahertz. And it can also be used in energy monitoring kind of scenario in a smart home. For example, the smart plug, or they can also use Bluetooth Low Energy. The DECT Ultra Low Energy is operates in the same frequency as our cardless phone that is being used at home. Since there is a large spectrum available, this DECT Ultra Low Energy can also be used for IoT communication. So here the bandwidth can be quite higher, with the transmission distance is also quite large, like 600 meters outdoor and 70 meters indoor is possible. So so again, the use cases could be kind of in-home display or even street light control, and those sort of applications can leverage this DECT Ultra Low Energy kind of technology. So other IEEE 802.15.4, which I had mentioned earlier in the protocol stack slide, where this allows short range mesh to be created using WPAN standard, IEEE 802.15.4. They operate in the 2.4 gigahertz frequency and also in sub 1 gigahertz, which is 867 megahertz in India. That is the unlicensed frequency. In sub gigahertz, it can go up to 500 meters to 1 kilometer distance of communication. Amongst these nodes, the distance can be 500 meters to 1 kilometer. And there is a PAN coordinator which acts as a gateway device. And you could have different nodes communicating amongst themselves and also to the PAN coordinator. So the node type can be kind of fully functional device. That means the device can communicate to anybody Whereas in the reduced functional device, it can only communicate to the coordinator node. And again, the use cases could be like smart metering, where energy meters can be fitted with 802.15.4 radio module for communicating to the data concentrator in the energy metering scenario. And also in any critical infrastructure monitoring kind of use cases, 802.15.4 is a good technology to be used. So typical node will look like this. For example, this is on the right hand side, you can see that the Telosby moat, which is again the University of California, Berkeley project, Smart Dust project, which I mentioned at the beginning. This is actually a product which is the result out of that initiative, the Smart Dust initiative. Crossbow Telosby has the microcontroller MSP430, and also it has the RF module called CC2420, which is compliant to the 802.15.4 radio standard, IEEE standard. So it has onboard sensors like light, temperature, humidity, and it can form a mesh network amongst themselves, and it can also support connecting to internet by having 6LoWPAN on running on top of it. So we need to have a gateway which connects this mesh wireless mesh network to the internet. So we need to have 802.15.4 technology from the gateway speaking on the one side, and then wired or wireless connecting to the internet on the other, so that these end nodes can seamlessly talk to the internet. So that is what is possible if we have the IP stack enabled. So there is also another amendment called time slotted channel hopping. Probably due to I think time constraint, probably I'll just give a brief in terms of instead of going into the details. So where instead of a CSMA CA MAC layer, it provides time slotted channel hopping. At the MAC layer, 802.15.4 can be enabled with the TISH layer, what is known as the TISH, for enabling real-time communication. So because by default, CSMA CA only supports best effort communication, whereas in a time slotted communication, one can ensure that the packet reaches within a particular time frame. So this is a very good use case for industrial IoT kind of application scenarios. So when we need real-time communication, probably the MAC layer will have to be reprogrammed instead of a CSMA CA MAC to TISH to enable real-time communication. So that is one amendment that is possible with the 802.15.4. So, and also there is recent efforts like IEEE 802.1 time-sensitive networking, which is again a framework where real-time communication is possible in Ethernet local subnet. So this is again one can look at if they are looking for industrial IoT use cases. So let me just now go into LP WAN standards and technologies. So the 802.15.4, as I mentioned, can also support operations at sub-gigahertz frequency, that is 865 to 867, instead of 2.4 gigahertz, because 2.4 is the default physical layer operation. But when it operates in sub-gigahertz, it can support long-range communication as well as mesh topology. The advantage here is that it can also support long-range, like 500 meters up to a kilometer, and also the nodes can talk to each other in a mesh formation, so that you can really extend the communication range by creating a cluster of cluster tree topology, just like the way you can see on the right hand side bottom of the image, where the smart meters either they can talk to each other, and also they can talk to the data concentrator depicted as data aggregation node, and in turn to the WAN. So this way the what do you call the the limitation of the 2.4 gigahertz short range can be overcome through the this particular frequency Wi-SUN standard. If it is used, probably this can support long range. But the bandwidth that is available, for example, in India is very limited. 865 to 867 is not a very big range of frequency allotted for this particular operation. However, there is actually planned by the Department of Telecom to provide or open up more spectrum for subgigahertz unlicensed, so that when there is more IoT applications, probably that will come into effect in some 915 megahertz frequency. They plan to open up another 5 megahertz frequency for operations. That is also in the pipeline. So other long range is also possible through 802.11 AH standard, which can also operate just like 802.15.4 subgigahertz. 11 AH also can operate in subgigahertz. And there is TV white space related Wi-Fi standard, which is AF, which is which can support up to 5 kilometer, and also they operate in the TV white space frequency spectrum. So because as Doordarshan is not really transmitting these days through terrestrial means, so many of this TV spectrum is completely available for reuse, even though it is not right now opened for other use cases. But this is one frequency spectrum that if it is used, it can support long range as well as standards compliant operation. And vehicle to vehicle operating in 5.9 can also support long range communication. And the LoRa WAN standard again operates in subgigahertz 865 to 867 or in 910, but not in India. But that is it can support in other countries. It operates in even 465 megahertz. So in these frequencies, it can support. They claim up to 15 to 20 kilometers, but definitely in practical deployment scenario, it can support more than a kilometer and more. And the redundancy can be achieved by deploying more than one gateway nodes. So that the devices can connect to multiple gateways, so that even if one of the gateway fails, so there is a redundant path available for the internet. So LoRa is essentially a low power. At the same time, it can also support long range. So some of the use cases like street lighting or energy meter data collection, all that AMI kind of applications can be enabled through LoRa. A similar technology is Sigfox, even though it is only predominantly used in Europe. It's not available. At least there is not much deployment in Asia, but it's mainly used in India. But conceptually, it's similar to LoRa. But LoRa is it's an open technology, open in the sense that one can buy devices and set up their own gateway and network. Whereas Sigfox, you can only buy devices. The gateway will have to be, or the base station will be managed by the service provider. So one is more like a cellular in that context. So one will have to buy end nodes and then subscribe to the Sigfox service, so that we can connect to the Sigfox cloud and enable smart city kind of applications. So it's more of a subscriber-based service. So another technology in the LPWAN is the cellular IoT standard, NB-IoT. So this is again is a licensed band. So obviously one has to make subscription with cellular service provider like Airtel, Vodafone. However, this can provide long range and ubiquitous connectivity. The advantage is like we have 4G network services available everywhere. So as and when NB IoT services are rolled out, now majority of the NB IoT services are tried out in more of a pilot basis at different smart cities. But when it is rolled out, their availability will be widespread and almost everywhere. So this is as and when it comes up, it will be like ubiquitous connectivity of NB IoT services. I'll just now try to go through the protocols a little quickly because of the time. So for the IoT, IPv6 is a major requirement for IoT network. Why? Because the IPv4 addresses have already been exhausted. So, and also IPv4 addresses are only 32 bits wide. So obviously we can only configure 4 billion devices with 32-bit address space. So whereas with IPv6 having 128-bit address space with billions of devices expected to be deployed, so IPv6 is a automatic choice for Internet of Things. So, and also in addition to this address space being one attraction for IPv6, it also supports what is known as auto configuration or neighbor discovery protocol, where the devices can configure its address without having to have services like DHCP or DNS based on the router advertisements. Because router generally in IPv6 network advertises its prefix on the subnet. So as and when the node receives the prefix, it can combine the MAC address of the device along with the prefix that is received from the router to form its own unique IPv6 address, so that they can configure themselves without anybody having to manually configure the end node. So this is one good attraction or the protocol feature which is available in IPv6 that is quite relevant in the Internet of Things context. So that is one of the reasons why we need IPv6 in IoT network. These are some of the compelling reasons why people have adopted IPv6 instead of IPv4 based IoT devices. So when we have IPv6, can that be run as it is? It is not straightforward. We need to have because these are low power and basically their memory footprint, everything is low constrained devices. So then the IPv6 layer has to be made lightweight, and some adaptation logic has to be made possible. So this is enabled through the standard called 6LoWPAN, which is an IETF standard. So this is run on top of 802.15.4 or other MAC layer or 5-layer protocols like LoRa, NB-IoT, and all of other technologies that I was mentioning. So all of them, if they run adaptation layer, so that the native IPv6 protocol can be run. So we need an adaptation layer so that these low power constrained nodes can, because the IPv6 packet size is quite large, so we need to have some kind of an adaptation layer to convert that long IPv6 packet to the short MTU of this constrained nodes. So that once the IPv6 is layered on top of these devices, so we can use traditional UDP protocols or HTTP compliant protocols like CoAP. So then it is as good as any IP enabled devices like our laptop or servers. These low power devices will also become the first class citizen of Internet. So they can connect seamlessly just like any other device. We plug into the Internet and we just do browsing. So same way, these devices, once they get connected, they can start sending the data to the Internet, to the cloud. So that is what is enabled through this 6LoWPAN. So I think I have covered most of the introduction part in the first slide itself. Probably what here also what I was trying to say here is also you can have heterogeneous MAC and physical layer technologies like IEEE 802.15.4, BLE, DECT Ultra. It could be any of these physical layer. Once you have the 6LoWPAN, that is the adaptation layer, implemented, then we can run traditional IP protocols on top of it to enable various internet applications. And also seamless connectivity to the internet will become possible because of this 6LoWPAN. I think let me not go into the details. I'll be sharing the slides with organizers so that you can always go into details and reach me for any details. We have done some projects on 6LoWPAN. 6LoWPAN is a major technology enabler for Internet of Things. So where it enables data compression, fragmentation, and layer 2 forwarding kind of protocol features for layering on heterogeneous MAC and PHY layer. So I think this is again, this diagram depicts the same thing. You can have multiple PHY and MAC layer from 802.15.4 to NFC to Bluetooth Low Energy to power line communication. However, if we can create an adaptation layer for each of these heterogeneous MAC and PHY, then the IPv6 can be layered on top of it seamlessly. So once IPv6 is layered, then the existing internet applications can be can talk to these end nodes seamlessly. So that is a major. And again, the 802.15.4 short range mesh will require what is known as the RPL protocol, routing protocol for low power lossy network. In a mesh topology, you want to have the network self reconfigurable. As I mentioned in my WS and initial introduction slides, where the network type is self-configurable. If one node failure doesn't affect the entire node to break down. So if there is a node failure, then the node configures itself to reach to the other alternate node so that it can reach to the cluster head seamlessly towards reaching to the internet. So these are kind of self-configurable. It supports RPL, enables such topology to be formed automatically. Once we have the WSN nodes coming into the network, they configure themselves in terms of children, parent, and then the ranks are all assigned so that the topology is created automatically. So again, this constrained application protocol at the application layer supports HTTP compliant communication between wireless sensor node and node to another node. So for example, if somebody wants to query a temperature, as you can see from the top right side of the figure, so one node can query the temperature with other node, and then they will reply just like as a HTTP reply. So it is as good as we send a query on our browser or a Google search. We send some request and the reply comes through the HTTP protocol. Same way, these wireless sensor nodes can also send out a request to another node for a query, and then the other node replies. So these operations are all compliant with HTTP protocol. So that means that you can even run these on our traditional browsers even. So just to give an example, so where we just query the let's say sensor pH value in a water quality, for example, by giving the IPv6 address of the sensor, then the reply comes back with sensor pH value is this much in real time. So the sensor node, the other end, it is a low power battery operated sensor node instead of a big high server. So that is what is possible because of the IP stack running on the low power node, battery operated node. So other protocol at the application layer is the MQTT, message queue transport and telemetry protocol, which is essentially IBM promoted standard, which is also quite popular. But instead of a client server or a request response model, which is supported in the CoAP protocol, which I just mentioned earlier, MQTT supports more of a publish subscribe model, where a publisher publishes the data and subscriber, depending on the topic of interest, they consume the data through a broker. IETF DetNet allows deterministic transport layer on top of the TSN physical MAC layer. So this is more relevant in the context of industrial IoT applications. So I think I'll try to go forward because of lack of time. Probably I'll have another 5 minutes or 10 minutes probably to cover my rest of the slides. So some of the emerging protocols that are relevant in the context of Internet of Things is on the software updates. For example, currently there is no standard mechanism where I can update my wireless sensor node, either applications or the firmware or what is running in the wireless sensor node. How do we update those things? Because just like we get the Microsoft Windows update happening in the background or periodic updates without having to manually do it every time or configure. So these are devices that are deployed in the field, and there is no physical reach may not be possible for every or it may not be possible frequently. So in those scenarios, we need to have a standard which supports firmware update through automatic means. So the software update for IoT devices is supported through this protocol called SOOT. So where the firmware server manages the updated firmware, any author can publishes it, and then the wireless sensor node can pull through this server, or it can be pushed all the way from the firmware server to the device automatically. So that somebody can also see whether the device firmware is updated by means of device management APIs. One can watch that what is the version it is running, because if there is a bug that is there, so somebody can exploit it to hack it. So if we want to avoid those scenarios, one has to have mechanisms wherein the firmwares are also updated periodically. And also if there is any anomaly detected, probably we need to get the software updated just like we do it for any other devices like our laptop or server or mobile phone. So the periodic updates to IoT devices also is required. And also another protocol that is emerging is on the trusted execution environment provisioning, where the secured applications are run on a different virtual machine, essentially trusted execution environment. So the normal applications are run on a different virtual machine, so that they don't interact with each other, and also the data that is available in the trusted execution environment is not accessed by the other applications. So we need to have mechanisms wherein there are different trust environment that can be created in a device platform, so that it is not meddled by some random deployment of somebody deploying some random software on a device can spoil the other applications running. If you want to avoid such scenarios, we need to have different isolated environments within the device should be possible, so that they are not affected by any malicious software. So some of the popular development platforms you can see, like Contiki, ARM Mbed. There are so many of them. OpenWSN, Intel initiative, Yocto project. Many of them are available for IoT development. So yeah, with this, I think my technology-related briefing is completed. I'll just now quickly brief in terms of what has been done within ERNet relevant in today's discussion. So one of the initiative by the government is from the Ministry of Electronics and IT. There is a initiative called the Center of Excellence for Internet of Things. The first COE for IoT was set up in Bangalore with support from government of Karnataka and also with industry, large-scale industry support. All big companies have also made their support to this initiative. where the space is available for any startups to come and utilize the infrastructure available. So where a lot of hardware and software infrastructure is provided for, from device development to software application development, any IoT application development related startups can come to this facility and use it by paying a nominal bench fee. They can come and develop products. From idea to product, this facility can support. So many startups have already been incubated in this facility, and they have also made very many prototypes. So, and the similar center of excellence are also being set up in Haryana, Gujarat, and the one in Andhra Pradesh, focusing on different verticals like health, industrial IoT. So you might get more information on the URL that is presented at this. The other relevant work that we have done is on the street lighting, smart street lighting deployment using LoRaWAN. This was done jointly with the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, where we have done a campus deployment and also in Electronic City in Bangalore, where LoRaWAN based streetlights were deployed, and we had made some experimental study in terms of the communication range within a dense deployment scenario, how it works, what is the communication range, what is the spread factor that can be utilized in a typical smart city deployment. That study was conducted using in an experimental setting. So another use case that we did is on LoRaWAN for energy meter. Along with the Central Power Research Institute, we have done some experimentation in interfacing LoRa node with energy meter for AMI application. And we also have done some prototyping through a funded project way back in 2013-14 timeframe for water quality monitoring, water flow metering. Those sort of applications we have enabled through the TELASB platform, which supports IEEE 802.15.4 RF short range mesh topology. And there is another work that is currently happening at our IIT Research Park Center is on the power line communication in a smart building environment, where we are trying to measure different environmental parameters and also the energy data within a building using existing power line instead of using wireless or other technology last mile. We are using existing power line communication under a initiative, IEEE initiative, PLC testbed initiative. Those faculty who are working on power line communication, please reach out to me, because I also head the power line communication initiative in IEEE to set up test beds for different scenarios. For example, similar to the smart building in IISc, one of the academic expert, he's trying to use for in-car within the car. He is using power line communication from the battery management system to the vehicle management system. He's using the DC power line mode for communication, and also in smart street lighting is also power line is used. So energy meter application is used in Tripura State Electricity. So we are trying to figure out what different use cases one can realize using power line communication. Even though it's a old technology, it is not being exploited in India to its full potential. So this IEEE initiative is looking at different application use cases for power line, so that this can be experimented in a testbed scenario, and then probably try to see whether there is any contribution to standard possible, or to the government body any report or white paper can be submitted, so that how this PLC potential can be realized in India. So that is the mandate of this IEEE working group. So anybody interested may reach out. I think with this, I'll conclude my presentation. Thank you very much for the patient listening. I think I have overshot by 15 minutes.
Sir, thank you very much, sir.
Yeah. You're able to hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Today's
Before
Yeah.
going for formal vote of thanks, there are 2-3 questions from the participants, sir. By Dr. G. Santi, COAP protocol can be used for building automation.
Yeah, definitely it can be used for building automation. It is a request response kind of a protocol. It is compatible with CoAP. For example, if somebody wants to measure the power utilization from a smart plug, for example, they can use a CoAP client and then query the smart plug by using the IP address of the smart plug. So that's possible. Yeah, one can develop even a mobile app where the CoAP client can run as Android app, and then the CoAP server may be running in a smart plug. So yeah, these are possible.
So next question, why F3NS are deployed in the network scenario?
Sir, can you repeat that question? I couldn't.
Why FTNS are deployed in a network scenario?
What is the spelling? SDNS, is it?
That is software defined networks.
Oh, okay. Oh, so okay. Why SDN is not used in? Why SDN is used or why SDN is not used?
Why FTNS are deployed in the network scenario?
Okay. Yeah, I think I don't know whether that is. Yeah, I did not present anything on SDN, but see, SDN in the large scale networking, you wanted to have programmability in networks. Number one. Other is that you don't want to have the. For example, currently, a lot of the routing decisions are done distributed. Like every router decides, and then they does the routing distributed locally. Whereas in the SDN scenario, you have the decisions taken by a centralized controller. So the manageability of the network is much easy in a SDN based scenario, where you can have a single controller making the decision. So you have a better management possible through SDN based approach in a large scale network. Yeah, and also the programmability. For example, the control plane software can be modified, customized programmatically in SDN, whereas in a router or a switch, existing custom-made router or switch, where programmability is missing, probably customizing for our application requirement may not be possible. For example, you want to allow a particular traffic and you want to block something like a firewall logic in SDN based traffic flow. So one can deploy such simple rules easily in a SDN based approach, whereas in a custom router, configuring it is not that easy. That too in a centralized manner. So means you can have multiple switches controlled with a single controller, and it can be run from normal commodity servers, so acting as a SDN controller. So the programmability is high on SDN. Hello, I think you are muted. Yeah. Hello. Yeah, you are
Yes,
muted.
sir. Can you share few examples of the sensor in water application area in smart cities? Smart city applications.
Yeah, water is it? Water? Or?
Yes, water. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Actually, we tried pH, then oxidation reduction potential. Some of those sensors we used for our prototyping. But for real-time water quality, probably I think you need more sensors. Like, for example, iron. Lot of, for example, our groundwater has a lot of iron content in Chennai, for example. So if you want to measure those things, you need sensors of different type. Probably what I have shown in my slides is more of a lab prototype where we have used pH, then electrical conductivity, and then oxidation reduction potential, ORP, those kind of sensors we used. But probably for a real field deployment, depending on the water quality, what parameters are to be monitored, I think we might require specific sensors. Yeah, probably the right people would be expert in water quality monitoring. So I don't have much other than what we have done in that project.
There is
But there is a actually separate expertise available within the research park. There is a clean water initiative within research park. Even IISc has a large water research group. There are low cost water quality monitoring using IoT mechanisms are available. And if this particular faculty is interested in this, I can also connect him or her to those researchers so that she can take it further if there is specific interest for her on the water quality monitoring, real time in IoT.
Okay, sir. The next one, sir, by Nikhil. Can I know more about the power line communication methods for IoT applications? You talked about at the last. I am an electrical engineer. He's electrical from IIT, sir. IIT
Oh,
Madras.
okay. Oh, I see. Yeah, so as far as this IEEE testbed initiative, we are looking more from there are two standards. One is the narrowband PL standard, which supports smart grid kind of communication, long range, low bandwidth applications like energy metering. And other is a broadband PLC, where it can support multi megabits communication up to even gigabit in power line. So those are used in home broadband network scenario, or even for or video transmission and so forth. So we under this IEEE initiative, we are trying to figure out different use cases that can be demonstrated with support from industry. For example, in our smart building testbed use case, ST Microelectronics is one of our partner, and IEEE is supporting it, and it is also done in collaboration with IIT Madras. One of the faculty from electrical, he is also a co-investigator in this. So we are trying. It's a small project, but where the testbed experience will be shared among the working group. So our idea is to create similar test beds for different use cases. For example, somebody wants to do let's say if there is interest in broadband PLC for utilizing for last mile. For example, a rural broadband connectivity, can they try PLC as an alternate option? If some rural community is not already connected on NOFN or some communication option already, can someone try with PLC as a last mile for a village? So those are the kind of PLC use cases we can try out in the Indian context, and try to let's say go to some industry for a support, or even to government agencies to figure out, okay, these use cases has not been tried in India. However, it is tried elsewhere in Europe or US. So which is relevant, because even though our power line network is not robust like West, like we don't have underground cabling everywhere, because we can see that villages have overhead cabling of power wires. So there are challenges, but in the new deployments, especially in smart cities or in rural electrification, where the wiring is much more stable, probably those are scenarios. And also the energy meter reading is definitely a candidate use case for PLC, which is already done by in Tripura. For example, we had a PLC working group meeting where the Tripura electricity utility, they made a presentation on the deployment in Tripura for automated meter reading. So they have done that completely on PLC. So there are specific use cases where we can try, and if there is more interest, please email me. We are glad to have more working group members contributing to this initiative.
Thank you very much, sir. There is one more question. Sir, can we use a router or a switch when there is a software which is replaced in servers?
Sir, can you just repeat? I missed some points.
Can we use a router or a switch when there is a software which is replaced in the servers?
I think this is a little generic question, but I'm not sure what is the context this is being asked. Because definitely, see, if somebody wants to remove a router, let's say commodity routers with, let's say, a PC or a server, definitely that is possible. For example, but the number of ports and other challenges will come into picture. For example, how many ports you can have in a server. So you need to have a commercial grade switches, but the programmability is the part where SDN can contribute. For example, can the particular router or switch supports changes to the control plane or external that open flow kind of protocol is supported by that particular switch? Then you can have the control plane running externally to the switch so that you can control the functioning of the switch, but the basic switching at the physical layer has to happen. So you can only take out the programmability part of the switch and then have the brain of the switch runs outside the switch. The actual physical switching of the packets happens within the switch. So that is what SDN is all about.
Sir, last question, the same participant, Madhusudana Reddy. Sir, as an engineer, can we reduce the cost of installing such a system in the smart city governance? Cost.
Yeah, I think this is a good question, but this is where the Center of Excellence, those kind of initiatives are all aimed at. For example, presently the sensors, majority of the sensors that are being deployed, they get imported from overseas. Even though we do a lot of software development, the physical sensor development and also to some extent, some of the hardware development is integration and all happens in India. But complete ground up of the IoT hardware development, if we can do ourselves in India, definitely the cost will come down. Because I have some of my research colleagues in IIT Bombay, they are developing a complete air quality monitoring system by themselves, and IAC is doing a lot of sensor development. So there are packets of the activity of that nature. Definitely, when we have deployment using those indigenous products, definitely the cost will come down. Your question is definitely valid, because if you, for example, when we had to measure the soil moisture and soil quality, we procured some sensors in 2011-12 time frame imported. So it costed something like 60,000 per sensor. So which is quite high. So, but we did not have any option those days. But recently, I also interacted with some IIT Delhi faculty. There is some sensors for soil quality measurement indigenously developed. So there are research activities happening. So as it progresses, probably the cost should come down, especially on the sensor front. But hardware node, I think the cost of the node is relatively cheaper. Either you import or integrate and develop custom made one. I think they are not much costlier.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Final question. Kindly brief about LoRa application in the air quality monitoring or management.
Yeah. So LoRa definitely it supports long range communication. So air quality monitoring can be done using LoRa network, but LoRa you need a dedicated gateway. So the coverage one has to study in terms of because I understand Tata Communications have done the gateway deployment at different cities in their own to even in their steel plants to monitor some of their facilities and infrastructure. But in city, if you want to do LoRa, definitely you need to have a robust base station connectivity, and so that this because you are going to run like a private network, so the reachability from the end node to the device is one aspect, and the other is whether your what are the locations you are putting your air quality sensors. So because some of them currently use cellular communication, so because that is available everywhere, and if the data size is not very huge, probably cellular will do the trick. But the only thing is it is a subscription based model, so where for every SIM card you put it on the air quality end device, so probably you will be spending some kind of a monthly prepaid card, means then there will be some cost to it on a monthly basis.
So, okay, sir. Thank you very much, sir. I think the participants' questions are over. So, I formally propose vote of thanks. Really, your session is very much informative and useful and more interesting also, because you have covered all the domains of wireless sensor network application for smart cities, including water, air, and transport, everything. So maybe that participant asked very good questions, very good questions. So we are really thank you very much, sir. On behalf of Chennai Institute of Technology, I thank you once again, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Dr. Parthiban, personally to you and also to the management of Chennai Institute of Technology. And I wish all the best to the workshop, rest of the workshop. And thank you.
Participant kindly join in the afternoon session at 1:45. This webinar exam app is monitored